Hi beautiful people, and welcome to review number 100. I mean, big review. There's more than 150 episodes once, and I haven't done number 150th yet. But I will do it eventually, calm down. And if you've seen the 50th episode one, but this is the special, this is for me, that still applies. Of course, if you have, you probably know that I try to stay honest to my choices. And I can like things universally seen as bad, but don't worry. I think most people like the central topic of this review. Surely, like the mega review, we'll do things in parts until we get to the big topic. Otherwise, the magnitude of the thing will be worth duck diddly. And since this is the second, let's start exploring the sympathy I have for number 2. I know a lot of people disagree, but I kinda see them being treated the way Seinfeld said.
Congratulations, you almost won. Of all the losers, you came in first of that group.
It's not unusual to see secondary characters be left to the side for not being the main one, then having their own episodes where they save the day once or twice, and getting a certain notion they could be as good as the main one. That's just not the case. Unfortunately, the second in command is many a time the joke, the one who gets some focus frequently, but it's the funny one, the less trustworthy, the more emotional, etc. Especially when they try to make it more comedic.
Are you kidding?
And the third one is already an everyman. And that's certainly the case with Mr. Fauntleroy. I don't know exactly when the more comical part of Donald became more important. Seems like it was quite early on, but it's something we still see today and not just with him. So let's take a look at his adventures made by Sega on their first consoles. But I'm not counting the Sega Pico. I don't even know if that would count, and I didn't even know it existed until now. We have 3 games to see, 2 in the Master System and 1 in the Mega Drive, or Genesis, so why not chronologically? The first one of them is the Lucky Dime Caper, an alternative reality where Darkwing Duck is actually Scrooge using his coins' good luck. I'm just giving ideas of how Disney can use Marvel, ain't I? The story is basic but functional. Uncle Scrooge decides to give a dime to each of his nephews, who are Donald's nephews, but they are his nephews too. I can't really say anything. My kids have a 20-year-old cousin they call their cousin, Gravity Follically, and the mere metal may magically modify themselves into mystical dimes as his. However, vultures abruptly abduct them, cueing Scrooge to promise payment for preservation and protection of the ducklings. Donald jumps to a jet, just don't judge how genuine that gels, and zips to the rescue. The game is well made, being both colorful and having had good effort put onto the animations. I love to see how they made sure to differentiate for when he is in a hot place or a cold one, be it living or dying. And having a different attack for your hammer when you're midair is quite useful. On the other hand, it leans on the easy side. I tend to think this is part of how Donald is seen. Being the funny guy, he ends up being seen as less competent, barely deserving a barrel, which leads to a less difficult game. And seeing just this game as I did years ago, I wouldn't have noticed this. But seeing them all together... It's a platformer and you can jump on enemies to defeat them, being also able to use a hammer or a frisbee. And like practically every game we got for the good old Mark III, we've got a Game Gear version too. When you're hit the first time in the Master System version, you lose your weapon. In the Game Gear, however, the hammer stays. Even if you're unarmed, you can get the hammer or frisbee if an enemy leaves them when defeated, or in the Game Gear case, in specific places. On top of that, we also have yellow stars, not those ones, that turn to red diamonds ones, not those ones, and they raise the weapon's speed. And in the Game Gear, you lose one of them when you're hit instead of dying, and having 3, they start giving points, while on the Master, 5 of them give you temporary invincibility, which almost always lasts way too little, which makes it useless. And that's just the first version of useless invincibility in these games. As for weapons, the Frisbee gives you a projectile, which can be quite useful, but needs to leave the screen before you can throw another, and it's not exactly easy to get the height for a mid-air target. The hammer, on the other hand, is slow and requires good timing, but with 3 stars or more, you become practically invincible to normal enemies, protected by a force field of spinning wood. Certainly, Woodman makes a lot more sense. The items in the Master System version seem to be completely random. Killing a simple enemy can give you a life, and you can get another one right after. One thing that can be quite irritating is that you can't get items mid-air, and floor for the game means below, so you might be lucky enough to get something you want and see it go away, because there isn't a floor to stop it. Likewise, you occasionally can be hit or die, because you're simply stuck to how the game works. The first 3 stages are a forest with more water, and Mexico, where you fight Baloo's cousin with a beehive Doo, which uses endless hives if you let him, breaking every law of physics, but possibly solving world hunger, who you must have hit so hard he might forget his whole life and become a pilot, a generic lion, and 2 statues possessed by spirits? Okay, I know these stone faces showed up before, but every previous time they are just physical. Suddenly they're chucking incandescent rocks. Out of the 3, they are clearly the worst one, because you have to get on the non-incandescent rocks to be able to jump on the statues. And after destroying one, you have to be pretty fast because the rock is going the other way. But of course, that's only if you don't have a weapon. It's not as difficult with the hammer, and it's ridiculously easy with the Frisbee. Likewise, after rescuing the 3, we have 3 more stages where the bosses are pretty easy, especially if you have the Frisbee. Behold, a boss fight. All to rescue coins. Well, I gotta make money, don't I? The hardest one here is Egypt, where you have to jump on a giant snake to be able to attack the boss, and if you've only got the jump, it can be extremely boring. But with the hammer, it's just jump and hit. Being careful not to take the music note to the face, but just jump and hit. The other 2, in Hawaii and Antarctica, are a little more difficult than the first ones, but far from being actually difficult. You just need to see the patterns and where to attack. Finally, we have Magicka the Spell's castle, and while the previous stages aren't bad, they have some weird moments. Not always for lack of effort, don't get me wrong, but for looking like they could use what they had better. We have a rope to jump higher and leaves blown by moles in the forest, for instance, which aren't batting anyway, but it's odd they happen by themselves. In the forest with water, we have a waterfall scene that was fast, but at least it's a full scene, leading to an underwater part, changing the gameplay for that moment, and finishing with trembling shivers. In the Aztec ruins, we have floating blocks that you have to avoid, but it's kinda slow, while the blocks melting in Hawaii require quite a bit of precision. What I'm trying to say is that, while it makes the experience unique, they seem a bit disconnected. It's not like this tongue of lava that erases in time, leaving the tea to impose its authority. This is just a detail you shouldn't notice, while these require your attention. When it's good, it's just a curiosity. When it's bad, it's quite noticeable. I feel they are all trying to do the same as the top of the castle. When you get to the roof, if you go left, you'll fall onto a part you've been at, and that's not a punishment. You choose where to go, and you can go the way forward if you want, or use this to explore more, hoard lives, and get the weapon you want. It's a detail that makes the place a little more realistic, much like the Antarctica having multiple paths, but since that doesn't increase the gameplay, it's easy to ask yourself, why is it there? On the castle, on the other hand, nothing seems to be left loose. Not that there are many complicated elements, between flying forks that envy the Sword of Omens, and the paintings of Magicka the Spell, who must have been jealous of Mario's castles.
They have falling rock faces? Mine will have my face!
But the variety is more noticeable, making yourself ask at times if there is a right way between two identical choices. The last boss, of course, is Magicka the Spell, who summons lightning and bombs to hit you always in groups of threes, but coming out of any place above. Just keep walking to the sides, pay attention, and attack the crystal ball in the middle of the screen. With the hammer it's easier, but with the frisbee it might end up being more worth it to just jump on it and fall as soon as possible. When the ball breaks, it's revealed the lucky dime was in it, which means that is the power she wanted? Doesn't seem enough to make a post-apocalyptic future. Donald goes back and we see that Scrooge's reward was a dime for him too.
Now the world don't move, just build the front door.
It's a good start for Donald. As I said, the game is more on the easy side, but it's fun anyways, and it has great music. It's just, this is on the Master. This was still the time when games had to be made and remade, and barrels became pizzas. And I kinda broke the order here, because the game was first launched for the Game Gear, which is a much better version. All of the ideas are basically the same, aside of course, the Master System having animated intros instead of fixed screens, and the music being slightly different. It's just, they are made for the console, thinking of how to make them work, which makes them feel chucked together in the Master System.
Hey, the game is ready, working well on the Game Gear. Is there anything else to do? Damn, Brazil and Europe still like the Master System.
Of course, the game can feel a bit claustrophobic with more full-screen moments, but the first stage, for instance, feels bigger because you can climb the trees instead of seeing everything in just one screen. That waterfall seems bigger and works better, being able to fall onto the underwater part in more than one place and not ending with the shivers. That boss that is so difficult for technical issues on the Master, here is just a bit more complicated for not using just bouncing rocks, but you don't need to find a nanosecond to be able to hit it. Do those have them bouncing cactus in them? In fact, you can hit the statues twice per rock, besides the spirits having kind of a glow, which makes it better visually. Before that, the squares are a threat. After that, the squares in Hawaii aren't as difficult and are also used as a platform you have to understand to be able to use instead of just getting the jump right. On top of various details like the Rain of Fire working better on the Game Gear, unlike fireballs waiting for you to get close in the Master. And it's simply more fun, because it was better thought out for the console.